Most people don't think about dams. They drive past them, take a picture maybe, and forget. But for those of us who work there, the dam is alive. It hums and creaks and shivers under its own weight. Steel shifts against stone. Water presses against gates. It groans at night, like it's dreaming. I started my midnight shift the way I always did, alone, in silence. The others had gone home at sundown. The valley below was black as tar, the river a snake of moonlight curling through the hollow. The only sound was the steady churn of turbines beneath me, like a mechanical heartbeat. Inside the control tower, the air was cold and smelled faintly of rust and damp wiring. I flicked on the overhead lights, pale and humming. The console stretched in front of me, panels of gauges, switches, and a red button I had never dared touch. Beside the console sat the logbook, leather-bound and scarred from decades of use. I made my first note of the night, 0000, all readings stable. That was the job. Every hour, I logged the numbers. Every half hour, I checked in on the radio. If something broke, I didn't fix it. I only recorded it. The dam's engineers always said, "You're a witness, not a hero." Sometimes, when the silence pressed too close, I would imagine the dam whispering to itself, the water murmuring against the gates. Tonight, though, even the whisper felt too still. At 12:15, I pushed my chair back and went to stretch my legs. I climbed the narrow stairwell to the observation deck. Outside, the air hit me sharp and cold. Floodlights cast pale cones across the dam wall. Mist rose from the spillway below, drifting like smoke over the valley. I leaned on the railing and let my eyes wander. Empty concrete, endless black water. Then for half a second, I thought I saw something move at the far end of the wall. A flicker of shadow where no shadow should be. I blinked hard. The deck was empty, just concrete and mist. Too much coffee, I muttered, shaking it off. Back inside, I settled into my chair again. That's when I noticed the panel. One of the red lights, Sluice Gate 4, blinked once. A sharp flash, then darkness. I checked the gauges, pressure steady, no vibration, no leaks, nothing. Still, I reached for the logbook and flipped through the last week's entries. There it was, September 28th, Gate 4 error, no cause found, resolved on its own. I stared at the line for a long moment, then wrote my own beneath it, October 12th, Gate 4 error, brief, resolved on its own. The pen felt heavier than it should have. At 12:30 sharp, I picked up the radio mic. "Black Hullo to control, check in." The speaker hissed, then crackled with a bored voice. "Control here, read you, everything good?" "Yeah, just a false alarm." Light blinked. "Copy that." The line cut with a pop of static. The room fell silent again. I sat there for a moment, staring at the dark panel light, and for the first time, I felt the weight of the dam pressing down around me, like it knew I was there.
The next half hour crawled by. I pretended to focus on the console, flipping switches, rechecking gauges, but my eyes kept sliding back to that dead panel light. It stayed black, as if nothing had happened. Still, I couldn't shake the thought of the shadow I'd seen outside. At 1 a.m., I logged the numbers. Everything normal. The turbines below thrummed steady. The river pushed against the gates, and the logbook looked just like every other night. On paper, the world was fine. But when I stepped outside onto the deck again, the world didn't feel fine. The air had turned colder, sharp enough to sting my skin. A thin fog clung to the dam wall, swirling slow, refusing to lift. I leaned on the railing, listening to the water roar beneath. And that's when I froze. There was someone on the wall. Far down, near the midpoint, under the brightest floodlight, a figure stood perfectly still. Tall, shoulders too wide, head cocked at an odd angle like it wasn't attached quite right. I told myself it had to be security, maybe a night patrol. But then I remembered there was no patrol after midnight. The dam didn't pay for it. The figure didn't move, didn't shift, just faced the tower. My chest tightened. I whispered into the cold, "Hey!" as if it could hear me across that distance. No answer. I gripped the railing until my knuckles went white. Then, just as I took a step back, the floodlight flickered. For half a heartbeat, the figure vanished. When the light steadied again, there were 3 of them. 3 shapes, equally tall, equally still, all facing my direction. The radio on my belt hissed suddenly. I jumped, fumbling for the mic. "Black Hollow to control," I said, my voice too thin. Are there people on the wall tonight?" A pause, then a dry chuckle. "Negative, Hollow. Cameras show clear. You're seeing things." I looked again. The figures were still there, motionless, silent, watching. "Check again," I insisted, my throat tight. "I swear I see." "Relax. Night fog does tricks." The dispatcher's tone hardened. "Log it if you want, but don't call again unless it's an actual emergency." The line went dead with a harsh crack. I lowered the mic slowly, my hands trembling. My breath fogged in front of me, and for a moment, I thought the mist twist into fingers reaching out. I stepped back inside, slammed the door, and locked it. My reflection in the tower window stared back at me, pale and shaking. I told myself I would write it in the log, just to have proof. But when I picked up the pen, I froze. The page already had new words scrawled across it, not in my handwriting. "Do not look again." The pen slipped from my fingers, and in the silence that followed, I realized the turbines no longer sounded steady. They sounded like breathing.
I didn't sleep that night. Not that I was supposed to. The midnight shift wasn't for sleeping. But I'd always stolen a few minutes here and there, dozed off with my head on the desk, lulled by the turbine's drone. Not this time. The words in the logbook burned in my head. "Do not look again." I wanted to believe it was a prank. Maybe one of the day shift engineers had scribbled it to spook me. Maybe I'd missed it when flipping through. But deep down, I knew better. I'd been staring at that page all night. It was blank, until it wasn't. My hand shook as I turned to the previous entries. The neat handwriting of text before me stretched back weeks. Numbers, notes, initials, all normal. Then I found something I hadn't noticed earlier. Tiny marks at the bottom of certain pages, almost invisible, pressed hard into the paper, as if someone had carved with the tip of a pen instead of ink. Shapes, circles, arrows, a crude outline that looked like the dam itself, and a dot, marked near Sluice Gate 4, the same gate whose panel light had blinked. I snapped the book shut and shoved it aside, telling myself I wouldn't touch it again, but I kept glancing at it out of my corner of the eye, the way you glance at a loaded gun left on the table. At 1:30, I picked up the mic for the scheduled call. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. "Black Hollow to control. Check in?" Silence. I tried again, louder. "Control, this is Hollow. Do you read?" The static hissed like water boiling. Then a voice, my own voice, came back. "Hollow to control. Check in." Word for word. My tone. My cadence. The mic slipped from my hand. It dangled on its cord, swinging. I pressed the speaker off, chest pounding, The room felt too small, the air too heavy. Somewhere deep below, the turbines groaned like something alive was shifting in its sleep. I told myself to calm down. Log it, like protocol said. Witness, not hero. But when I opened the logbook, my breath caught. Another line had appeared beneath the last entry. Gate 4 is open. My pulse hammered. That couldn't be true. The gauges would show a drop. Alarms would scream. Water would be pouring into the valley. But the dials stayed steady. The alarms silent. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed my flashlight and headed for the maintenance stairwell. My boots echoed against the concrete steps, each one louder than the last. The air grew damp as I descended, cold mist curling around my ankles. At the bottom, the steel door to the inspection deck groaned open. The roar of water hit me like a wall. I lifted the beam of my...
I stood frozen on the inspection deck, the roar of the spillway pounding in my ears. My flashlight beam trembled as I followed the line of wet prints again. They started near the stairwell, tracked across the slick concrete, and ended in front of Sluice Gate 4. The prints were bare, no tread marks, no laces, just long, wide feet pressed deep into the rust and damp. I crouched, touched one with my fingers. It was ice cold, as if whoever left it had stepped straight from the river. I aimed the flashlight up at the gate, solid steel, bolted shut. Water thundered behind it, held back by nothing more than engineering and prayer. No cracks, no leaks, and yet the logbook had sworn it was open. A sound rose above the roar, a low hum, faint but steady. At first I thought it was machinery. Then I realized it wasn't coming from the gate at all. It was coming from inside the wall. I pressed my ear to the concrete. The hum shifted. It wasn't mechanical. It was a voice, whispering. I jerked back, my heart hammering. The flashlight beam shook wildly across the wall, catching on damp streaks that looked almost like handprints. Behind me, something scraped. I spun. The stairwell door was closing slowly, as if pushed from the other side. The slam echoed through the hollow deck, leaving me in a tomb of concrete and water. I grabbed the handle, yanked it open. Empty stairs stretched upward, but the metal railing was wet, dripping as if someone had just passed by. I didn't wait to think. I bolted up the steps 2 at a time, breath ragged, the hum still buzzing in my skull. When I reached the control tower, I slammed the door shut and threw the lock. The console lights blinked calmly, as though nothing had happened. The gauges held steady, but the logbook was open on the desk. A new line sprawled across the page. You shouldn't have looked. I staggered back, chair legs screeching against the floor. My pulse pounded so hard I thought I'd faint. The radio crackled suddenly, a burst of static, then a voice, low, broken, distant. Already inside. I snatched the mic. Control, say again, who is this? Only static, then the same whispering hum threading through the signal. I killed the power to the radio and stumbled back against the wall, clutching my chest. My breaths came sharp, shallow. I told myself it was a prank, some sick joke. Maybe the engineers had been messing with the equipment for years, adding notes to the logbook, patching voices into the feed. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a prank. Something had walked the wall tonight. Something barefoot and cold had left prints that ended at a sealed gate. And now, whatever it was, had followed me inside. I could feel it. In the silence between the turbines, in the shadows pooling in the corners of the room, in the way the tower seemed to breathe with me. I was no longer alone.
I didn't touch the radio again for a long time. I sat in the chair with my hands on my knees, staring at the console as if willing the gauges to stay steady. Every second felt heavier than the last. The turbine's rhythm below had changed again, less like machinery, more like breath. Inhale, exhale. At 2 a.m., duty forced me to check in. My throat was dry, but routine was routine. Witness, not hero. I picked up the mic. Black Hollow to Control, check in. The response came instantly, but it wasn't Control. It was me. My own voice, tinny and distorted, echoing through the static. Black Hollow to Control, check in. Exact words, same tone.
I dropped the mic, heart racing. The echo repeated itself, fainter, like a tape winding down. Then silence. When the line cleared, another voice bled through. Low, flat, almost mechanical. Gate. Open. I froze. My eyes slid to the panel. Gate 4's light glowed red again, steady this time, as if daring me to look. I forced myself to breathe, to move. My pen scratched against the logbook. 2:05, radio interference, repeated call, unknown voice. Gate 4 alarm lit. The book felt wrong in my hands, heavier than paper should be. And when I lifted my pen, fresh words were already written beneath mine. We hear you. I slammed the book shut. My pulse thundered in my ears. The tower's fluorescent lights flickered, humming louder. In their stutter, I thought I saw a shape move across the far wall, something long-limbed, ducking low as if trying not to be seen. I squeezed my eyes shut, told myself it was the flicker, just the flicker. The radio clicked on by itself. No touch, no hands. Static filled the room. Then a voice, sharp and urgent, a woman's voice this time. You're not alone up there. Don't trust the logs. I snatched the mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. Nothing. Just the turbines groaning, the static pulsing like a heartbeat. I let the mic fall. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's when I noticed the sound. Not from the radio, not from the turbines, from the stairwell. A slow, deliberate creak of a footstep on the metal stairs. One, then another. I stared at the door. The lock was still latched. I could see the bolt in place. But the steps kept climbing, closer, louder. And then they stopped. Silence pressed against the room so hard I thought my ears would burst. I waited, counting breaths. Then soft as a whisper, from the other side of the door, my own voice. Open the gate.
I didn't move. I couldn't. The words still rang in my head, my own voice whispering through the steel door. Open the gate. I stared at the lock, half expecting it to turn on its own, but it didn't. The door stayed shut, the bolt still across. Silence pressed against the tower until even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. I backed away, one step at a time, until my knees hit the console. My hand fumbled for the flashlight. I wanted the comfort of its beam, even in the lit room. That's when the stairwell groaned. Not footsteps this time. Something heavier. A dragging sound, like wet fabric sliding over steel. The noise wound upward, closer, until it stopped just beyond the door. I held my breath. Then 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, each one shaking the frame. I almost broke then, almost ripped the lock open just to prove nothing was there. But I forced myself to stay still, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. After a long, unbearable silence, the knocking ceased. The air seemed to loosen, though not by much. My chest ached from holding my breath. I turned back toward the logbook. I don't know why, morbid curiosity maybe. I half expected more words to have appeared. They had. We are already inside. The letters were jagged this time, scrawled across the page like they'd been carved instead of written. The paper was torn where the pen dug too deep. I slammed the book shut. My fingers were slick with sweat, and the leather cover felt warm, as if it had been sitting over a fire. I needed air. I forced myself toward the observation deck, unlocked the exterior door, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap. Fog still blanketed the dam, thicker now, clinging to the floodlights until the wall looked like it was drowning in clouds. I gripped the railing, searching the concrete span. At first, it was empty. Just mist, light, and shadow. Then I saw them again. 3 figures standing midway across the wall, perfectly still, perfectly silent. But something had changed. They were closer. My heart hammered. I blinked hard, hoping they'd vanish like before. They didn't. The mist swirled around them, but they stayed, watching. And then slowly, too slowly, they began to move. Not walking, not marching, sliding,
Their bodies glided across the wall, feet never lifting, arms swaying like reeds in water. Closer. Closer. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. My hand found the door handle. I yanked it open, stumbled back inside, and through the lock. The turbines below groaned louder, a deep rumble that shook the floor. The panels flickered red in unison, alarms that should have deafened me, but no sound came from them. Only the low, rising hum that had followed me since the deck. It filled the room, pressing against my skull, vibrating in my bones. And under it, faint but clear, I heard voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, whispering in unison, repeating the same phrase over and over. Open the gate, open the gate, open the gate.
The chanting wouldn't stop. Even after I tore the radio plug from the wall, even after I shoved the logbook into a drawer and slammed it shut, the whispers filled the tower. They threaded through the turbine's roar, slipped beneath the hum of the lights, pressed against the walls like water against glass. I wanted to run, God, I wanted to sprint down the stairwell and never look back, but protocol was nailed into me like scripture. Stay at your post, record everything. So I stayed. But I needed answers. The dam kept its old records in a steel cabinet near the back of the tower. I'd never opened it before. The key was dusty on its hook. My hands shook as I turned it in the lock. The door groaned open and a smell of mildew and paper drifted out. Inside were thick binders, their spines stamped with years going back to the 60s. I pulled one at random. Pages of maintenance logs, inspections, water levels. All ordinary. Too ordinary. Then at the back, I found an envelope. Unmarked. Yellow with age. Inside was a single page, typed, edges singed. Half the text was blacked out, but what I could read made my stomach drop. Third sighting confirmed. Entity appeared human at distance, failed under close observation. Communications mimicry successful. Subject ordered, gate opened. My hands went cold. A second binder. Another envelope. This one worse. Photos, grainy black and white, workers in hard hats standing on the damn wall, pointing at something just out of frame. A smear of shadow on concrete that didn't match the light. On the back of the photo in ink, do not acknowledge them. The voices swelled around me as if they knew what I was reading. The radio hissed again. Speaker dead but alive, forcing sound through nothing. You've seen us before. I shoved the envelope back, slammed the cabinet shut, and pressed my back against it like I could hold the secrets inside. My chest heaved, sweat ran cold down my spine. That's when the tower lights flickered. Once, twice, then out. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the thin beam of my flashlight. The chanting stopped. The silence was worse. I turned the beam toward the console. The gauges still glowed faintly. Every needle swung to red, pressure maxed, turbines straining, alarms flashing without sound. But it was the logbook on the desk that froze me. Its drawer was open, wide. The book lay on top, open to a fresh page. New words scrawled in jagged black ink, letters so heavy they cut into the paper. We are waiting in the deep. And beneath it, drawn in a single rough line, was a circle with a mark through its center. The symbol I had seen etched faintly in earlier pages, only now, it was fresh, wet, as if someone had just carved it there.
The flashlight trembled in my hand. Its thin beam cut across the tower walls, but the darkness swallowed more than it revealed. The hum of the turbines was louder now, pounding like blood in my ears. I couldn't stay here, not with the book writing itself, not with voices crawling through dead speakers. I needed to see the gates again, to prove to myself they were still shut. I forced my legs to move, one heavy step after another, toward the stairwell. The lock was still latched. My hand hovered over it, shaking. I listened. Nothing. No knocks. No whispers. Just the deep, constant rumble of water pressing stone. I drew a long breath, slid the bolt back, and pulled the door open. The stairwell was dark. No emergency light. no glow from below. Just a shaft of steel steps vanishing into black. My flashlight caught the railing, wet again, glistening as if a storm had just passed through. A cold mist curled up from below, carrying the smell of river water. I hesitated, then started down. Each footstep rang too loud, echoing upward until it felt like someone followed a step behind. Halfway down, I froze. A sound drifted from the depths. Not the turbines, not water. A voice. Down here. Low, flat, familiar. My own voice. The beam shook across the steps as I pressed against the wall. I told myself it was an echo, some freak of acoustics. But the words came again, stronger, layered with others, until it was a chorus of myself whispering from the dark. Down here. Down here. I wanted to turn back. God, I should have turned back. But something pulled me forward. Some terrible need to know. At the bottom, the steel door to the inspection deck gaped wide. I hadn't left it like that. Fog rolled in thick, curling around my legs as I stepped through. The roar of water was deafening. My light swept across the sluice gates, sealed, unmoving. Yet the footprints were back. Fresh this time, wet, glistening. But not just one set. Dozens. Bare feet stamped in rust and damp, crisscrossing the deck in impossible patterns. Some small, some massive, some dragging long as if whoever left them had been pulled. They all converged on gate 4. I swallowed hard, shining the light up the steel face. It stood solid, bolts gleaming. But the footprints didn't stop at its base this time. They trailed upward, pressed into the gate itself, one after another, as though something had walked straight up the vertical wall and vanished into the steel. My breath caught. My hand slipped on the flashlight, and the beam jerked across the deck. For a split second, it lit the far corner. Someone stood there. Tall, wrong. Shoulders twisted, arms hanging too long, head cocked as if broken. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. The light flickered, and when it steadied again, the corner was empty.
The corner was empty, but I swear to you, someone had been there. I stood frozen, beam shaking across the slick concrete. The fog shifted like breath, curling between the sluice gates, whispering against the steel. The air was so heavy it felt like the dam itself was leaning over me, listening. I told myself to turn back, to climb those steps, lock myself in the tower, wait out the night, but my legs moved on their own, slow, reluctant, as if pulled forward by the footprints. Every step brought me closer to gate 4. The prints up to steel face glistened in the light, wet as if they'd been pressed seconds ago. And as I lifted my beam higher, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A hand. Not flesh and bone, but an impression. 5 long fingers embedded in the metal, stretched wide, halfway up the gate, as if someone had gripped the steel and pushed straight through. The hum grew louder. My bones buzzed with it. My teeth ached. The voices threaded back in, layered and wrong. You've always been here. You are one of us. Open the gate. I stumbled back, flashlight skittering across the deck. Its beam cut across the fog and landed on myself. I stopped breathing. A figure stood at the far end of the inspection deck. Same boots, same jacket, same face. Me. It raised its hand, slowly, perfectly in sync with mine. I staggered left. It mirrored. Right, mirrored. Then it smiled. I didn't. Its grin was too wide, stretching across its face like a tear. Teeth too many, too sharp. I dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the deck, throwing shadows like broken limbs. By the time I scrambled to grab it, the thing was gone. My chest heaved. My pulse thudded so loud it drowned the turbines. The radio on my belt hissed. I nearly ripped it off, but a voice cut through before I could. My voice. Stay with us. I hurled the radio into the river, watched it vanish in the black water below. But the whisper didn't stop. It came from inside my head. The footprints around me seemed to shift, to glisten, to pulse like veins. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing myself to breathe, to anchor. Witness, not hero. Witness, not hero. When I opened them again, the fog had thickened, curling around the deck like walls. The footprints had multiplied, hundreds now, covering every inch of concrete, all pointing toward Gate 4. And from behind the steel, I heard it. Not a hum, not a whisper. A knock. Slow, heavy, from the inside. Once, twice, 3 times, and the gate shuddered under the weight.
The first knock rattled the air. The second shook the deck under my boots. The third echoed so deep it felt like it came from inside my chest. I staggered backward, flashlight beam trembling across the gate. The steel bulged, just slightly, like something enormous pressed against it from the other side. The bolts groaned, metal straining. The turbines below roared louder, too loud, vibrating through the concrete until dust sifted from the ceiling. "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." The gauges would have shown it. The alarms would have screamed. But when I glanced at the tower windows above, I saw the panels flickering red like a heartbeat, and not a sound came from them. The only sound was the knocking. Behind me, the fog stirred. I turned and froze. Figures. Dozens of them now, rising out of the mist like shapes peeled from shadow. Tall, wrong, too stiff. Their heads bent, arms dangling, all facing me. Every last one wore my face. 100 versions of me staring blankly, lips curled in half smiles. The hum rose higher, splitting into layers of voices, mine, all mine, chanting in unison. "Open the gate, open the gate, open the gate." I stumbled for the stairwell, feet slipping on damp concrete. My beam caught the rail, slick with water that wasn't there before. I ran, 2 steps at a time, lungs burning, throat raw. The voices followed, echoing up the stairwell like a flood chasing me. When I burst back into the control tower, the lights flared, blinding white. The logbook lay open on the console, pages flipping by themselves in a frenzy. Words scrawled across them faster than any hand could write. "The gate will open, the gate will open, the gate will open." Over and over, line after line until the paper tore and bled ink onto the desk. I slammed the book shut, but the words burned through the leather like heat. My hands stung as if scorched. The tower shook. A low crack split the air, deep and final. I staggered to the window, pressed my palms to the glass. The dam wall below was splitting. Hairline fractures spread across the concrete, glowing faintly as if light leaked from inside. The figures lined the cracks, dozens of them, hundreds of them, pressing their hands against the stone as if helping it break. My throat locked. I whispered to no one, to myself, to the dark. "If it breaks, the valley." Thousands of lives below, towns, farms, families. The turbine screamed like a dying animal. The panels went black. The hum in my bones grew unbearable, like every cell in me vibrated toward tearing. And through it all, one voice, louder, closer, unmistakable, mine, right behind me. "Don't fight it."
I spun. And there I was, standing in the doorway to the stairwell, dripping river water onto the floor, eyes fixed on me. Same jacket, same boots, same face, but wrong. The grin stretched too wide, teeth too sharp, as if the mouth had been cut open and never healed. It stepped inside, leaving wet prints on the concrete. Each footfall echoed louder than it should have, like steel striking steel. I stumbled back against the console, flashlight beam trembling across its face. The thing didn't flinch, didn't blink. It spoke in my voice, low, calm, too calm. "You don't have to fight anymore." The words sank into me like hooks. My throat tightened, my heart slow, dragging in my chest as if trying to match its rhythm. It tilted its head, water dripping from its chin. "You belong to us. You always have." I shook my head, breath ragged. "No. Yes." Its smile widened, splitting its face. "Every word you've written, every number you've logged, it was us. Witness, not hero, witness, so the story lives when the gates open." The tower shook again, a deep groan rising from the dam. Through the window, I saw cracks widening, light spilling from them like veins of fire. The figures on the wall pressed harder, their heads snapping up in unison to face the tower. The thing stepped closer, only a few feet away now. I smelled the river on it, cold and sharp, mixed with rust. "You can't stop it," it whispered, but you can choose. Drown with them or join us." Its hand lifted. My hand, perfect in every line, every scar. It reached toward me, dripping black water that hissed against the floor. My back hit the console. Panels flickered under my palms, gauges swinging wild, alarms flashing without sound. The logbook snapped open on its own. Pages tore free, flapping like wings around the room. Words scrawled themselves across the paper midair. "Say yes." The thing's hand hovered inches from mine. Its grin widened further still, until skin split at the corners, tearing, peeling. Behind the smile, darkness churned like the surface of the river. I closed my eyes. My pulse thundered. My lips parted without meaning to. The turbine screamed. The crack split wider. The whole dam groaned like a beast about to wake. And the last sound I heard before the light flared white was my own voice whispering, "Yes."
When I opened my eyes, the tower was gone. I stood on the dam wall itself, floodlights sputtering in the fog. The roar of water pounded from every side, but I couldn't tell if it came from the spillway or from inside my own skull. All around me, figures lined the concrete. Hundreds of them. Tall, stiff, wrong. Each one wearing my face. They stood shoulder to shoulder, hands pressed against the cracked stone, their mouths moving in perfect unison. The chant rose like a tide. "Open the gate! Open the gate! Open the gate!" The wall shuddered beneath my boots. The bolts shuddered one by one, falling into the void below like sparks. And through it all, I saw him, the other me, the first one I'd seen, standing at the far end of the wall, smiling, waiting. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't listen. My hands rose of their own accord, pressing against the stone. My palms burned cold, sinking into cracks that weren't there a moment before. The wall groaned louder, the turbines shrieked, and then silence. For one impossible heartbeat, everything stopped. The water, the voices, even my breath. Then came the sound. A single, final knock. The gate split wide. Light, blinding, endless, erupted from the crack, swallowing the wall, the figures, the fog, the valley. I felt it tear through me, hollow me out, fill me with something vast and endless, something older than the dam, older than the river. I was no longer watching, no longer a witness. I was part of it. They say the Black Hollow Dam still stands. If you drive past, you'll see the wall unbroken, the turbines humming, the valley below calm and safe. That's the story they tell. But I know what I saw. I know what I became. And if you ever take the night shift there, if you ever sit in that tower with only the turbines for company, you'll hear it too. The knock. The whisper. Your own voice on the radio, asking you to open the gate. And when you do, because you will, you'll see us waiting.